The noble fir tree has been a powerful symbol of fertility, renewal, consistency, strength, and even immortality through every culture in which it has been found. Today, it's fir tip season, and we're gonna go hunt fir tip to make medicine and more. So let's jump into it. Wah! Fir is one of the most highly sought after woods for logging. It's a great building material, and this has caused a lot of damage in hunting out these high quality firs. The important thing to remember though is these trees aren't just a resource for us to extract. They're also an ecosystem for many birds and insects, large mammals, and so much more. They help with the mycelium underground to build up the forest flora and fauna, and this makes a resilient planet. And this is the important thing for us to remember, that these forests are for everyone and everything, not just us as an extraction resource. These are some impressive giants. I'm always in awe when I'm in a Douglas fir second growth forest. These trees are probably 100 to 150 years old. And this is actually considered some of the oldest ones around. Even though there are 400-year-old Douglas fir trees, this is what we have today to really kind of symbolize the grandiose of fir. Now I want to identify this tree a little bit for you because it's not actually a true fir. It's considered more like a false hemlock. It's not even in the fir family. Here we have the balsam fir and the hemlock and the pine and the Doug fir. But this is truly a Doug fir environment, and it's one of my favorite ones to connect with, so that's why we're going to harvest those ones today as medicine and just work with those tips and start to bring that into our herbal pharmacy practice a bit more. So here's a baby Douglas fir, and you can see how soft the needles are. They're coming out in a whirl around the stem, and they have this nice flat but really soft and gentle feel to them. Whereas right beside it we have the balsam fir. Now this has a flat needle as well, but they're all attached on the stem at the same place, forming more like a flat plate versus this whorled shape that we see on the Doug fir. This one is also quite a bit more lemony. Balsam has this kind of higher terpene profile. It has a really strong lemony scent, and it's one of my favorites to eat on spring salads. Oh yeah. Here's a good example of the hemlock and the fir growing beside each other. Now at first you might not see the difference, but you can really see how the hemlock has these longer and shorter needles. They're both flat, and all the little hemlock tips are coming out in these small bits, like so. These are the new spring hemlock. Whereas the fir tip, the new growth is happening at the very end. The needles are softer, they're more consistent, and they're all around the same length. Now here we have a pine tree, and you can see that the needles are more pointy. They are bunched at the same spot on the plant. And this one we've got 5 needles all coming together. And underneath it, we have a spruce tree here, which is much sharper, but also has needles that are pointy and kind of square, not flat like the fir trees. Pines are pointy, spruces are square, and firs are flat. So hopefully that gives you a little bit around the idea of the fir versus the pine versus the spruce. And if you want more, you can find that in a good ID book or online, of course. Throughout history, people have had legends or stories or mythos around the power of this tree, whether it's around fertility or its strength or resilience or being up high and stable. This tree has always symbolized something of power. And this also comes down to how it shows up as an ecosystem, as this resilient being. I'm going to share a little First Nations story about the fir tree and the mouse. This has come through many different cultures and is very famous. It's not my story, but I'll give an interpretation of it. The idea is that there was a great forest fire, and the mouse was in the forest and had nowhere to go, and it couldn't run. It wasn't big like some of the other animals. It needed to hide, and it looked to all the different trees. It looked to the maple tree, but the bark wasn't the right kind. It looked to the alder tree, but the alder tree couldn't help it. It asked the great fir, and the great fir said, "Come into my bark folds, and I will protect you. You can hide in my cones." And to this day, we actually see little mouse feet in the ends of the cones sticking out. That's one of the key identifiers of the fir. But really, the story is about resiliency. This tree is resilient to forest fires. It is protective, and it has that strength and fortitude and a nobility of honor. And this is how I like to see fir trees showing up. And I think this is how it was interpreted by many different cultures. Now, of course, in some versions of the story, the mouse ate all the seeds of the fir cone and the fir got angry and the hawk came down and ate the mouse. And there's always like different iterations of that. But the reality is this tree is one of protection and strength. Ever notice how when you go for a walk in a fir forest, you feel at ease, you can breathe better, and it's strengthening the immune system. This is part of the medicine. And I love to do what's called forest bathing, which is just wandering through the forest, connecting in with the different plants in the ecosystem, but also tuning in with myself at that level. And fir tree has this capacity to support our lungs and our breathing. Much of this is in the terpenes that are in the fir. And this is why we like to work with it as medicine, because of all those terpene profiles. It's got high vitamin C, it's got camphor and different aldehydes and ester groups and all these chemicals in it that help us breathe better, that help open our lungs, help our respiration, work with our antioxidant potential within our blood, on the skin. They're anti-inflammatory. Many of these compounds that are in fir tips are also antifungal and antibacterial. So we can see this tree as having a lot of resilience medicine in it. Even when we look at the sap, we see a lot of this was used commonly in medical profession for protecting in operations and using to patch up wounds. We can make salves with it. We can make different types of breathing support, skin inflammation support, but most importantly, this medicine helps us feel better and strengthen our immune system. So that's why I'm out harvesting fir tips today, is because I love working with this medicine. I love enjoying it in mocktails and cocktails as a syrup. I love crushing it up and putting it on different foods, baking with it, and so much more. So we're gonna go harvest some right now, but we gotta get out of these big trees and into the edges of the forest where I can actually reach the fir tips in order to harvest it. Now here we have a great fir tree for us to harvest. You can see all the bright green tips. This is what we're looking for. It's tender, it's soft, and it's perfect for making into different types of preparations. Before I harvest, I just want to give some thanks to the fir. Love this tree, this noble species, one of my just all-time favorites. I spend a lot of time in these forests, so I just want to tune in and say thank you, fir. We're happy to be connecting with you today. Your bright and beautiful blossoms are looking so good this season, and I want to share with you a bit of me, so I'm going to go chill out by the bark there at your base and just give you some love. Okay. Hey there, little fir. I'm going to share with you one of my hairs. I'm going to leave this hair for you. Hopefully you can connect with me as I connect with you. All right. One of the easiest ways to make something with fir tip is actually just to take these fresh tips and stick them into sugar and get the sugar infused with the fir tip flavor. This is just super simple. You can add this to all kinds of things. Like all plants that we work with as herbs, it's nice to add different things to this. So like most herbal medicine, fir tip likes to be in community. So it's a great one when we're doing herbal formulation to add it in as part of those immune teas, right? So we might put this in with a little bit of rose hips or echinacea, or one of my very, very favorite combination is fir tip and elderflower. Maybe that's because they grow at the same season, but I just love making syrups with both of these and then enjoying that combination on a hot summer day, cooling me down, helping me breathe better, and just making me feel more alive. Another favorite tea of mine is a forest man tea, as I call it, a really forest friend tea, we'll say. And this is where we start to look at all the trees and plants that have a lot of these healing benefits and that taste good. So I'll often add a little bit of Oregon grape flower because it's in this time of year. I might add the licorice fern or the Labrador tea in with fir tip and just kind of play with some of these other ones, maybe wild ginger. What is there around that I can make a forest friend tea with? And this is definitely a good base. So that's something to think about when you're harvesting your fir tips. Also for baths, I love having a herbal bath. Well, really, I say that, but actually my wife likes having herbal baths more than I do. And we often make different kind of herbal potpourris to put in the bath. And one of the things in a muslin bag would be fir tips. Maybe we can make this into a salt. I haven't really done that, but I could see that we've done a lot of like other herbal infused salts, and fir tip would be a classic one that we could just infuse into salt to give that really nice flavor. It also goes really well in vinegar because a lot of those terpene profiles can be extracted in apple cider vinegar. So that's a great way to get some of the medicine out, to make kind of a vinegar shrub type thing, or use a kombucha vinegar to kind of almost pickle the fir tips or put them into some kind of suspension that way and maybe eat them later, because you can totally eat these, especially if they've been pickled in vinegar. Or we could use that vinegar as a base for things like fire cider, right? So if we're gonna make a vinegar type cocktail, like a shrub type drink, or a fire cider, fir tip vinegar would be a great base. I think that's enough different fir tip medicines. Just know that this is an abundant plant in use. It tastes great. It adds in and blends well with many other herbs, and is just a great one to start to add to your herbal repertoire. Got my bag full of fir tips, and I'm ready to start crafting some fir tip preparations. I mean, look at these. Aren't they beautiful? Well, I think that's enough fir tips to harvest for today. I can harvest for days. There's just such an abundance of this. And something that fir really represents to me is that resiliency. Again, this is a tree that is all about the intact community, about supporting others, being in a noble way, and really standing up in truth and strengths, and again, resiliency. So I hope you got to tune in a bit with fir tip with me and learn a bit about this medicine and a little bit about why we might want to connect and save these forests, and some of the reasons why this is just a precious part of our planet for us to get to know better. Get out and have your own relationship with fir, and I hope that you have a furry good time doing so. All right, we'll see you soon. I mentioned that I love making fir syrups and cordials and meads and cocktail culture with this plant. So join me in the second part to this video on how to craft up your own syrups and vinegars and shrubs and so much more.